I got a question from a supporter on Patreon about the political interpretation of Game of Thrones. The book series is called A Song of Ice and Fire. The first book in the series is called Game of Thrones, and the TV series that spun off from it is known as Game of Thrones. This is a brief, interesting period in the history of the world where a mainstream work of fiction and a mainstream TV show is actually taken seriously as great literature, as a great work of art, and also really is taken seriously for its political significance. And if you think Game of Thrones, with its reflections on the meaning of aristocracy and feudalism and the emergence of democracy, if you think that's not politically provocative enough in the English language, imagine how it is received and interpreted right now in Arabic. Imagine how it is received and interpreted right now in Saudi Arabia. I was asking Muhammad, who appeared on this channel a few days ago, about this. He didn't know. He'd never thought about that before. I forget if he read the books in English, German, or Arabic, or a combination of all three, because he's at least trilingual. And imagine how in future this book is going to be perceived, this book series, in Chinese. I know there are two separate translations, one for Taiwan and one for mainland communist China. So it's a book that carries weight. And the question I've been asked here has a lot of political significance to it. The question is, to what extent do the books today, and this is taking all the books together as they now exist in 2019, to what extent are the books today pro-fascist? In that, as the person asked the question put it, at the beginning, it seemed as if the rule of the Targaryen household, the rule of people of Valyrian ancestry over Westeros, was presented as a bad thing, but they have more and more become the heroes of the story. And again, this isn't really like one chapter of the story or even one volume. It's looking at this body of fiction as a whole, that they seem to be more and more positively presented as time goes on. And who are the Valyrians? Who are House Targaryen? Well, to some extent, they share these characteristics of the fascist master race fantasy about feudalism and aristocracy. Not just that they're, you can't say blonde-haired and blue-eyed. They're white-haired and violet-eyed, a step further, and white-skinned. But that they actually, as the story goes on, it becomes more and more explicit. They don't just have a myth of biological superiority or specialness in their bloodline, but that for the purposes of this work of fiction, they actually literally have special hereditary biological characteristics that justify their racialist and racist attitudes. Now, the shortest and most direct answer to this, given that in 2019 the book series is incomplete, is to look at the precedents we have in some of the simple, self-contained political statements in George's earlier writing. And the two I'm going to go to here are A Song for Leah and 7 Times Never Kill Man. These are relatively short works of fiction. Game of Thrones is enormous. And then we can jump ahead also and look at the presentation of House Targaryen and the Valyrians in the true beginning of the story, which is not chronologically the start of the publication history, but is the Duncan Egg novels, right? So, Melissa, that was what you read first. You started with the Duncan Egg novels. I think there's absolutely no doubt in the reader's mind that the rule of House Targaryen is sick and twisted and evil and bad there. One of the main images we're given is of this member of the family, of the royal family, snapping the fingers of a puppeteer for insane reasons, and then that everyone backs him up. And the concept in the society was that if you did anything, if you hit or struck or reproached or reprimanded a member of this family, you would be killed, or the hand or foot that had punched him or kicked him would be cut off. Mm-hmm. So we're given this isn't a kind of value-neutral introduction to the system of feudalism and the rule of this house. This is an incredibly bleak, incredibly negative introduction. And that is the introduction chronologically you have to keep in mind. Indeed, at that point, the audience doesn't yet know, is there a real biological difference between this bloodline and the rest of the society they rule over, or is it merely an imaginary difference? Now, the pattern that plays out in George R.R. Martin's earlier works, A Song for Leah and 7 Times Never Kill Man, is the following. He takes a justification for a political view in the real world that he disagrees with, that he wants to attack, and he shows you, even if this were literally true in some parallel universe, the justification would still be bad and evil and wrong. So in the case of A Song for Elijah, what he is showing you is, okay, in our world, the Catholic Church, for example, justifies its rule over society and mankind, especially in the Dark Ages, justifies its social influence and power by, among other things, offering you an afterlife, the reassurance that in some sense you will live forever. Obviously, not only the Catholic Church, Protestantism, Islam, and so on, to some extent, all share in this. They're promising you an afterlife. In the world we live in, it's not real. It's a justification. But he gives you a science fiction world, a hypothetical parallel world, in which this is literally true, in which people, in some sense, literally live forever after they die if they join this religion, and they're physically absorbed into like a giant jello mass that takes all of their memories and incorporates it into a super brain that lives forever, and they're happy about it. They love it. The physical sensation of being consumed by this parasite, they experience this great joy. And even while they're alive, before they give themselves over to this jello-like mass that absorbs them and gives them a type of immortal life, he sketches out for you the way this shapes the whole society and their behavior and culture. It's all, the awareness of this potential for one day being reunified with all of humanity, with all of their alien species, the way this shapes their behavior. And it creates a world that is in some ways a paradise and in some ways an unbelievably horrible dystopia. Why does he do this? He doesn't do it because he thinks in our world, wouldn't it be wonderful if people had immortality and lived forever? It's the opposite. It's very clearly trying to show you, even if this justification or excuse for religion were true, religion would still be bad and evil and wrong. 7 Times Never Kill Man is instead taking on the justification for religion. And again, it's not just religion, but in many ways this is a justification for the Catholic social order of the Dark Ages, feudalism in Europe's history, broadly speaking. The justification that, well, religion may have some downsides and disadvantages, but it also provides peace, harmony, order, good government, a kind of disarmament of man against man. And what he shows you is, on a science fiction world where this is literally true, where it literally, religion stops all conflict, prevents any kind of war, and protects people one against another, and organizes every village, and where it really provides this kind of harmony, it's a terrible thing. So why does George present this kind of fascistic fantasy or justification for society, and why does he yet nevertheless present it very negatively? To my mind, again, it's completely clear, starting from Dunk and Egg, we're given all the warning signs. This is a bad thing. Being ruled by a royal family who believes that they're the master race and so on, and who believes they're biologically better than the people they rule over, this is introduced to us in a very dark way. I guess the only flip side of that is, you can say in the Dunk and Egg novels, you also see that they are normal people in many ways. One of the first Targaryens we meet is an alcoholic. He's kind of face down in a bar, drinking himself. We do see the kind of, they're not so superhuman. They're kind of just regular people, but they don't think of themselves as regular people. So we see that side of it. To my mind, it is very clear that the structure of the story as a whole, which is currently incomplete and may remain forever incomplete, that it's going to be this same pattern that we saw in 7 Times Never Kill Man and A Song for Elijah, that the point ultimately is, the justification is wrong, and that the story on a large scale is going to show this. The real question, the real challenge to this is, what is the significance of Daenerys Targaryen being anti-slavery? I don't want this video to be too long, but I think there are many morals to the story we're supposed to draw from her war against slavery. In many ways, of course, it's an allegory for the American involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan, for the futility or just failure of those efforts, which happened during the years in which these novels were composed. In some ways, it's a reflection on his experiences of the Vietnam War. There are different kind of levels and obvious influences to this. But I think it also, just like why House Targaryen exists, why the Valyrian versus Westerosi bloodline question exists, it shows that it is fundamentally evil to have someone arrive and conquer your society who thinks they're biologically superior to you, that their civilization is superior to yours, etc., even when they have this ostensibly good intention in mind of abolishing slavery, something the audience is going to sympathize with, and that the fictional characters in the novel sympathize with. Nevertheless, the consequences are unbelievably bad and tragic and evil. And I think already in the books as they exist now, if you include the sample chapters, we get a good sense of why. Okay, so that is my answer. Obviously, to some extent, it is a bet about what the books are and what they're going to become. To my mind, there is absolutely zero possibility that the solution to the world's problems in A Song of Ice and Fire is going to be that George tells you the moral of the story is resign yourself to be ruled by a breed of fascist, feudal, aristocratic supermen because they're better than you and they told you that they were better than you and they consider their bloodline superior to yours and their civilization and their history is better than yours. That is completely inconceivable to me. And I would also say that probably the thorough literary and political examination of any one component of the story, whether that's the history of Meereen and Daenerys, or the history of, say, Dorne and its struggle against the crown, or the history of the North and its struggle against the crown, and so on. None of them make sense if you think that's the author's conclusion that he's working towards, and definitely not the structure of the works as a whole, beginning with Dunk and Egg. Never forget, the Dunk and Egg stories, the prequels, were written later, basically to correct the mistakes he had made when he started book one and when he did chronologically, and he didn't yet have the plan for what the books as a whole would be. So that reflects the mature author's intent in trying to make a complete work of literature of this. Guys, I do this commentary because I think it matters. I do think that Game of Thrones, the A Song of Ice and Fire book series, is going to be remembered as one of the most politically important publications of this century. And I'm really genuinely interested. What does it mean to people in Taiwan? And what does it mean to people in Israel? That's a really interesting question. I mean, it's been translated into Hebrew. What does it mean in the, Arabic-speaking world? And what are the implications of that legacy going to be as time goes by? It is definitely not going to be remembered as just another TV show that had a lot of naked ladies on HBO. Definitely the book series has a lot more to offer, a lot more to think about, and a lot more questions like this worth debating.